lot more than I expected it to. Okay. First things first. Ranting Monkey, thank you for the influx of subs, but what have you done? Now I have to up my production quality sooner than I was planning on. I'm not prepared for this. Think, how can I improve my production quality just at random? I know. I'll be back. One sec. This is Daphne. She is my, expedited production quality. My production quality just walked out of the room. So, there's that. Anyway, let's get on with the video. You don't have to be racist to be racist. My goodness. Clickbait title is slightly clickbaity much. And another thing, my AP Lang professor would cringe if he saw this headline. It's in direct contradiction of itself. And it's not even clever at that. It's just a cheap grab for clicks. Barely any thought put into this. But let's break this down. Surprise, racism does not always have to come from the minds of racists. Well then, where's it coming from? Sokovia? Narnia? Land of Oz? Earth Prime? The Themyscira? The Mirror Dimension? Wonderland? Other fictional lands that I am sadly unable to travel to this summer break, but also am forgetting the names of because I'm just running a blank on the rest of the fictional lands that I've read about and seen movies of. Whatever. Whether you experience it or not, the issue of racism is still very prevalent in a diversified country like America. Sure, in certain areas of the country there are people who hold certain ideas about certain races. However, a good majority of the population acknowledges that those ideas are wrong. And whether you believe it or not, there are many actions that are considered to be racist, even though being racist was not the intent. And how can something be considered racist if the intent to be racist is not present? It is called colorblind racism. Okay, so colorblindness is defined as not influenced by racial prejudices, and racism is defined as prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. I might suck at calculus, but those two definitions do not equal each other in the slightest. Not even a little bit. So please, explain this to me in idiot terms with lots of pictures and statistics and graphs and charts and such so that I can understand where you're coming from. A type of racial discrimination where people of color are unintentionally disregarded when someone is selecting individuals to participate in an activity or service. Not only is this very prevalent, and another thing, prevalent?
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
If this is truly as prevalent in our society as you think, then by all means, use a specific example. Use multiple if you please. Otherwise, I will be forced to flip a desk, because you just based an entire assumption about people on a straw man argument. I'm not going to be picky. I will take anything, even one of those stupid Facebook emoji button reaction polls, as evidence. That's how low my bar is set in our current society, but it is very harmful, as colorblind racism often stems from cultural racism and predisposed stereotypes. American sociologist and professor of sociology at Duke University, Eduardo Bonilla Silva, has discussed his views on systemic racism in America, even despite the lack of people doing or saying things that are not overly racist. Sociology has in recent years gone from flaccid wiener to inverted mangina, and I can't take it seriously, and I'm a psych major. Granted, one with a vested interest in the criminal and biological aspects of psychology, so my threshold for evidence is a tad bit higher than average, but still! If you want people to take soft sciences seriously, again, you have to show some semblance of evidence that depicts causation, or at the very least, a strong enough correlation that gives people cause to reason the way you'd like them to reason. Bonilla Silva has discussed the 4 different central frames of racial colorblindness in his book Racism Without Racist. That was published in 2013, stating that abstract liberalism, naturalism, cultural racism, and minimization of racism are at the core of colorblind racism. A book is all fine and dandy, but unless you can quote me a single instance in that book that depicts actual unintentional colorblind racism, then I can't exactly take you seriously. Racism never went away, it just became harder to identify. I will concede that racism has never and will never truly fade from existence, especially with people crying racist over stupid things such as the irreconcilable notion that being against segregation is somehow racist. However, racism is by no means hard to identify. We know what it looks like. It was a very prevalent part of American culture for a significant portion of America's existence until the Civil Rights Movement eventually pointed out how shitty and silly it is to not treat people the way you would like to be treated by others simply based on skin colors, and not merit of the individual. It was in fact a very long process that I think we should give MLK and the rest of the civil rights activists credit for, but with articles like these, they're probably spinning in their graves a great deal right now. I would be if I worked to fight racism and segregation, only to find out that racism is everywhere, even if it isn't anywhere. What? Is this the Matrix? I think it is.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
Of course, racial discrimination is not as severe as it had been during the era of Martin Luther King, an advocate and leader of the civil rights movement. As if people don't know who MLK is, so he deserves some sort of in-text annotation to make sure people know who he is. It's not like everyone and their mother learned about the man who was essentially the closest thing to a cross between Jesus and a Wonder Pet. But there are still many changes that need to be made. That's right, activism's work is never done, even when it is. That's why they're called activists and not slacktivists, because they gotta keep themselves busy somehow, or someone will tell them to do something productive with their lives, like get a STEM field degree and close that earnings gap, eh? In order to diminish racial discrimination and the notion that some races are superior to others based solely on one's racial and ethnic background. I know I touched on this in my last video, a tad. But, Morgan Freeman, will you please?
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman. You're going to say, well, I know this white guy named Mike Wallace. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Colorblindness is how you get rid of racism, yet you want to call the complete lack of racism, racism, and honestly, I just don't know how to respond. Like, how? Why? What even?
Weebo? It's me, Professor Brainerd. Focus. Weebo? Can you see me? Weebo? It's all right. I need to get some sort of extension cord, something so I can recharge her. I've got to download her quick. Weebo? It's all right. It's okay. Weebo, can you hear me? It's going to be all right. I'm just going to get you to the docking station so I can make repairs.
With the growing exposure of discrimination to adolescents through online and real-life interactions comes the ideology that people of color are somehow lesser than those of Caucasian and or European descent. This ideology that is spreading and being implied into the minds of adolescents is dangerous because it causes a sense of depleted self-worth in the youth that identifies as a person of color. Like...
My ex is now dating a big-ass, old-ass, ugly-ass, cave beast, Urugu, Neanderthal Tom, toilet complexion individual. So if y'all thought that I hated white people before,
Big Donald Trump, white people, boy.
No. And you still have yet to give me an actual example of this occurring. In a scholarly journal called Social Bias, Prejudice, Stereotyping, and Discrimination, written by Sabrina Keene, Keene explains social bias, prejudice, and stereotyping, and how it affects the lives of individuals from day to day. And how does it? Give me an example. Anyone will do. An instance, some concrete data that I can research for myself? Not! Well, most Americans believe public schools should be integrated. A portion of the population is uncomfortable with interracial marriage. Direct quote, by the way. 1. What does that portion even mean? A large portion? A small portion? A medium portion? Who knows? Who? Where's your source to support that? To me, it sounds like you're making it seem like there's an epidemic, when in fact it could just be a minority of people who are uncomfortable with it, which, here's a graph to it, states that approval ratings for interracial marriages have gone up, while disapproval ratings over the last 50 years have gone down. Here's a more in-depth analysis of that very data. A US Today / Gallup poll released in September found that 86% of Americans approve of black-white marriages, compared with 48% in 1991. Among ages 18 to 37, 97% approved. That's a very large percentage of people. 3. What even does school integration and life partner preference have anything to do with each other? Like, does not fit. That's the Journal. I'm not debunking that. I'm criticizing the journalistic prowess and capability of this, Evan person? That's the only name that I got. She explains that individuals who do not fall victim to bias are often able to use such circumstances as motivating factors. Individuals are often afraid of what they do not know. The best defense against ignorance is knowledge. Sure, biases exist. I'll even accept the nature of the culpability of the unconscious bias, even though it's kind of like impromptu, unprovable shenanigans that I've ever read about. But you gotta give me evidence to suggest even a tiny bit that this is an issue on a social and systemic level, rather than a portioned and individual level that warrants such an epically proportioned oxymoron as you don't have to be racist to be a racist. Until then, colorblind racism is some bullshit. Education and familiarization with the objects of a prejudice or stereotype allows the truth to be discovered and applied. Being educated allows an individual the ability to embrace and accept differences in other, and aids in bringing society together. As Keene perfectly explains, a person who falls victim to stereotypes and prejudice is likely to feel defeated and have negative connotations towards others. Okay, but there comes a point when you cross territories from educational to a conspiracy theory territory, and then it's no longer educational. You got me? It becomes delusional and paranoid, and those are not the people we should be listening to. Take Black Hitler, for example. Ghazi is someone whom I think we can all agree has dove too deep down the rabbit hole, past the point of no return.
First and foremost, humans are not a race. It's a species. And last time I checked, there was this study that showed that, like, Europeans have a considerable amount of, like, Neanderthal DNA. So I don't know if we are the same species. I don't know. I mean, I'm not being, like, prejudiced and hateful. I'm just stating off scientific facts. You can check it. Links all over. I'll post a link, okay? Don't get mad at me. Get mad at the scientist.
No links. Okay. That's cool.
So, like, yeah, and African people of African descent have no Neanderthal blood. Like, we just sitting over here real pure, like we're just real pure, 100% human over here. No Neanderthals. So I don't know.
Ozzy spouts such pretty ridiculous word gymnastics that would make your head spin, and yet somehow he has no idea that he sounds more like a raving racist lunatic than any white person he's probably ever interacted with.
We don't have to have a reason to hate them just because they breathe. We hate the filthy bums. You people need to get off your ass and wake up. This is America. The niggers are taking it over, and the Jews.
That would be an example of actual racism. Take note. People of color that experience colorblind racism every day can either fall victim or use this newly found ignorance to their advantage. When people begin to familiarize themselves with racial discrimination, what racial discrimination are you talking about here? Because you have yet to actually state a concrete example, and until you do that, I am disinclined to give your stance any standing of merit in terms of validity. If you want me to familiarize myself so much, then by all means make me familiar with one single concept, one example, please, towards people of color, even if it doesn't apply to them personally. They are able to gain a newfound sympathy for the individual. Once a social bias is destroyed, society gets one step closer to eliminating racial discrimination due to less people spreading the negative ideals and more people being educated on the effects of discrimination and why they can cause people of color to feel anger towards those trying to suppress them. In order to bring all groups in society together, we need to work together as a whole. We need to understand people of color and educate those who are ignorant to our history. We need to be more empathetic. We need to unify. We need to strive for change. Okay, I will agree with you that the solution to any social bias for anything lies in the power of knowledge. But as of now, we disagree that there is an actual problem at hand. mainly because of your neglect to provide a legit example of what you claim is an issue. And to reiterate for those of you who have lost track completely, the original claim was people who are colorblind are still racist to a degree.